Monte, the room is ready when you are.
Great, thank you, Jeff. Is it possible to get and maybe I just don't know how to do this, to get the board members up on the screen? I mean, I have two screens and I have half of my board on the second screen. Is that something I need to learn how to do, or is that something you guys can do as the host?
I don't know. I'm hoping Brad is, if he knows some kind of trick there. I don't happen to know myself if that's possible.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, I can perhaps help. There is a way that you can set under video settings, that you can set it to only show those with video, hide non-video participants. And if you click on that, all of the people who aren't active with their video will not appear on the main screen.
All right. Okay, well, I'm not adept enough to do that. So, okay, well, we're going to go on. I'm not going to mess with that right now.
Mr. Chair, this is Brad Carr, Community Development Analyst. You can also drag and drop. You can click on somebody's face and then drag their box to wherever you would like that to be ordered.
All right. Well,
Oh, like from the second page up to the front page?
yeah,
Yes.
that's not working either. Okay, well, I will figure this out on another day and we will just go on with the meeting so I don't hold everybody up with my ineptness, my Zoom ineptness. So, okay, I'm going to take roll, I guess, or call the meeting to order. Jeff or Diane, do we have the normal reading that you want to read before we start with all the Zoom instructions?
Certainly. Jeff Crick, Planning and Development Services Director. Good morning, everyone. I'm going to provide a few procedural reminders for the virtual meeting. This meeting is being recorded and broadcast on the city's YouTube channel and Public Access Channel 25. During the meeting, when you are not participating, please mute yourself by clicking on the microphone icon found on the lower left-hand side of the Zoom menu next to the video icon. When you are muted, a red line will appear over the icon. Muting your microphone during the meeting makes it easier for everyone to hear. You'll just have to remember to unmute if you want to speak. In some cases, I may mute or unmute people as needed to minimize distractions during the meeting. Please remember to state your name every time you speak for the benefit of those listening remotely. You can turn your video camera on or off by clicking the video icon in the menu. For the purposes of the meeting, when you are participating in the meeting, please keep your video on. When you are not participating in the meeting, it is okay to turn your video off. You will still be able to listen to the meeting when your video is off. You'll just have to remember to turn your video on when you resume participating. Turning your video off when you are not participating will help make sure the active meeting participants can be seen on the screen. In some cases, I may turn someone's video off if they are not actively participating to avoid distractions during the meeting. You can always turn your video back on during the meeting. If you are participating by phone, you can click *6 to unmute your phone. For those using Zoom, somewhere on your screen you will see a choice to toggle between speaker and gallery view. Speaker view shows the active speakers. Gallery view tiles all meeting participants. Board members and city staff, you must state your name and your title each time that you speak. All motions will need to be stated clearly, and after a motion is made and seconded, the chair will call on the board members individually to provide their vote. Chair, when you announce Chair, when you need to announce whether the motion carried and the vote to the count. When public comment is sought on an item, individuals participating via Zoom should use the raise your hand feature. Windows and Mac users can access this feature through the participants button at the bottom of their screen. Android and iPhone users can access this feature through the More button located on the bottom right corner of their screen. For those calling in by phone, you may dial *9. Individuals will be called upon by name in the order they appear on the meeting host screen. When you are called on, please unmute your device and state your name before speaking. The chair will then call for in-person public comment for those with access without technology options. Staff present will direct you to the podium to speak, following social distancing and safety protocols. The regular time limit will apply. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Jeff. With that, I am going to take roll so we just know who's here, and then we'll get into public comment. So Edith, just respond with aye or yay or whatever. Edith Guffey.
Aye.
Cole Brown. Shannon Reed. Shannon Oury.
Aye. Or here.
Christina Gentry. Rebecca Buford.
Here.
Sarah Waters.
Here.
Erica Zimmerman.
Here.
Dana Ortiz.
Here.
Ron Gacius.
Here.
Thomas Howe.
Present.
Paul Newsom.
Here.
And Monte Soukup here. So I believe we have a quorum and we're good there. So let's move on to public comment. So do I have anyone interested in making public comment? I see Gabby Boyle has turned on her video. Gabby, would you like to address the board meeting?
Yes, absolutely. Hi, everyone. My name is Gabby Boyle. I am here today representing the Sexual Violence Prevention work group. We are an interdisciplinary collaborative work group that's addressing the issue of housing from the angle of violence prevention. So first, I want to establish that sexual violence is really pervasive in Lawrence and that it is directly linked to housing. The care center served over 1,200 unique clients in the last 2 years, many of whom experienced violence while they were houseless or who were struggling to maintain stable housing as a direct result of their abuse or assault. At Family Promise, domestic violence is one of the top 3 self-disclosed reasons for houselessness. And of course, the Willow remains at capacity, near constantly providing emergency housing to people experiencing intimate partner violence or domestic violence. So I would like to invite you all to imagine a future where the cycle of violence and housing instability is broken and where everyone in Lawrence is guaranteed not only safe housing, but also can live free of a fear of violence. I think there are many steps that we could take towards creating this future, and I think that the board has already started to consider some of these steps. For instance, I know that y'all have been investigating source of income discrimination policy and what that could look like in Lawrence. And I just want to highlight that our neighbors in Kansas City, Missouri have enacted source of income discrimination ordinances despite similar state preemption from Missouri. There are many states that prohibit rent control, and counties and cities in those states have still created policies that prevent source of income discrimination in spite of that. So I think that we really need to remain progressive and proactive when we pursue that type of policy at a local level. And even if that, source of income discrimination policy is not possible, there are still many other measures that could be taken. So for instance, there are currently no tenant screening regulations in Lawrence, which for many properties, the screening process is super restrictive or exclusionary and is just like not transparent at all. So tenants could be screened out of housing for anything from an insufficient credit score to what the landlord might perceive as a lack of strong character references. Many landlords require proof of income that demonstrates someone make at least 30% of the rent, which is ironic considering that over 50% of tenants are cost burdened, spending at least a third of their monthly income, if not more, on their rent. Usually these applications require prospective tenants to finance their own credit and background checks out of pocket, which could quickly add up to hundreds of dollars if folks are applying to multiple properties, which oftentimes they are if they're getting rejected consistently. Minneapolis and Seattle are 2 communities that have addressed this with policy, with local ordinances. And I think this is, again, another step that we could take that would be complementary towards some of the conversations that you have already been having. I know that there are a lot of organizations and activists working at the emergency sheltering level and the emergency housing level, but I think we really need to look beyond that to longer term preventative solutions for the community that kind of operate at that like systems and policy level. So that's what I'm here to say. Thank you all for listening and for all the work that you do.
Thank you, Gabby, and I certainly appreciate the write-up that you sent in advance of your comments. That was really nice, and I've made a couple of notes here for us, to continue discussion on a few of the items you brought up. So that'll probably occur later in new business, but thank you again for your comments. Steve Ozark, I see you popped on, or did you want to make a comment?
Yeah, is Sarah there in person? Sarah Taliaferro?
Development Services Director. Mr. Chair, we do have people in the room here. Sarah is here for
In-person public comment.
Okay, I guess let's, I can't see that, so if you would direct those people to the podium, we'll take the people that are in the room. Thanks.
Go ahead.
Yes, because Steve is calling in remotely, I'll actually read for him and myself. So this is joint comments. I'm Sarah Taliaferro, speaking on behalf of both the steering committees for homelessness and affordable housing. Justice Matters has been investigating cities that have achieved great strides in eliminating homelessness and how to pay for it. I won't go into details of our journey, but I would like to touch on three things. First, the contours of the problem. Second, the opportunity available with recent federal COVID relief and stimulus money. And third, the Housing and Homelessness Summit that is coming up on April 28th and 29th that I hope all of you could be a part of. The scope of those experiencing homelessness in our community are getting clearer every day, thanks to the work of the Built for Zero team at the county and our own volunteers who interviewed guests at the Days Inn over the winter. Here's the basic breakdown of what we're learning. There are approximately 260 to 300 chronically homeless individuals right now living on the streets in Lawrence. The term chronically homeless means living on the streets for over a year or a total of a year off and on over the course of 3 years. Every person's story is different, but this population is likely to suffer from severe and persistent mental illness and/or drug and alcohol addictions. Approximately 115 of those chronically homeless are bouncing around regularly between jail, the emergency room, and the streets. Their life expectancy tends to be 25 years shorter than the rest of us. Lowering the barriers to get them into housing so that they can succeed in treatment as compared to making housing a reward for successful treatment appears to be, or in fact is, the best practice. This housing first approach has assisted cities like Rockford, Illinois, and Bergen County, New Jersey, to eliminate chronic homelessness for a series of years. On top of those experiencing chronic homelessness, service providers estimate there is an additional 130 to 150 individuals who are just now entering homelessness right now, who have not yet met that 1-year mark, which would put them in the chronic homeless category. These members of our community include working people sleeping in cars, children trying to make it in school, women fleeing domestic violence, those with temporary job loss, and etc. Again, limiting the time they are homeless or preventing them from homelessness with rapid rehousing before they become chronically unhoused appears to be the best practice for financial and health reasons. Along with the newly and chronic homeless, we have an untold number of people in our community who are right on the brink of losing their home and their stability. We don't know exactly what this looks like, but Dana Ortiz at Family Promise has vigilantly reminded us that preventing homelessness is cheaper and more effective than working to get someone out once they lose the roof over their head. The numbers are not perfect, but it gives you a contour of the total picture as shared by service providers. Now, on to the federal money that has been injected in state and local governments and specifically into homeless relief. In response to the pandemic, both former President Trump and current President Biden have made funding available to address homelessness. This includes $21.5 billion in emergency rental assistance, $5 billion for housing vouchers, $5 billion to reduce homelessness, and $120 million for housing counseling and fair housing. This does not include money city and county governments will have at their discretion, nor the remnant from the $25 billion passed for housing in December. As the Kansas Housing Corporation director told us in a meeting, this is the most money put toward homelessness and housing from the federal government since the 1970s. So if Lawrence was ever to have an opportunity to address homelessness, this would be the time to do it. Our homelessness crisis meets the opportunity of federal funding. For that reason, we jumped at the opportunity to work with a trusted long-term advocate for the homeless in our city, Andy Brown. Andy has worked at the Lawrence Community Shelter and Burt Nash and ran the mental health hotline headquarters. He now works as a commissioner at KDADS. Last month, Andy offered to facilitate a housing and homelessness summit that would develop a comprehensive plan for federal funds. Plans for the summit have been developing with members of Justice Matters, city and county staff, Burt Nash, Family Promise, Tenants to Homeowners, and others. It will be held mostly virtually on April 28th and 29th of this year. The goal is to bring stakeholders together to understand the needs and craft the most effective proposal for the use of federal funds. We essentially want Lawrence to be the first with the best plan forward. That concludes my update. I just want to thank those of you on the Affordable Housing Advisory Board that have helped with this process and share that I'm exceptionally hopeful for the future. Thank you, all of you.
Thank you, Sarah and Steve, and thank you for the work you're doing in that arena. And, certainly, the organization of these processes outside the city, city organization to help forward these causes. So thank you. Okay, Jeff, do we have anyone else in person?
Jeff Crick, Planning and Development Services Director. We do not.
Okay. Steve, I see you got your hand up. Did you want to make a comment?
Yeah, thank you. My name is Steve Ozark. I'm with Justice Matters Homeless and Affordable Housing Advisory Board, and been walking with y'all on this for a while. A couple things to add about this summit on the 28th and 29th of April is, especially on the 29th, if you can make yourself available, this will be, I believe, the skin on the bones for Lawrence to get these millions of dollars to utilize this funding, this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for housing in your charge to identify affordable housing. So, and as Andy informed us, it's the most amount of money available since the 1970s. And again, as I said last month, your work is just critical because as I listen and the research that's done, it's really the affordable housing component that is so much the question mark about how do we find it and afford it in Lawrence, Kansas. We have so many challenges. And so your work to me is the pinnacle of the result that we will have with the money. Money's great, but the plan for it is key. So that 29th of April, if you can all make time, you'll get written information we'll submit. I also wanted to just let everybody know how this came about. So in doing research for our homeless research committee, we sent out emails and Andy responded to one about things that could be done at the state level at KDADS. So we just merely did 2 exploratory meetings to see if we had something, if what we were hearing, what we could do. So then we got with Jill and the county and with the city and with the community, because again, Justice Matters is here to help invite systemic change. We are not the experts. You all, some of you on the board there are that do the affordable housing. But I wanted to make it clear, we just did 2 exploratory meetings, and now the summit is being turned over to the experts so that we can really take advantage of a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. So your work is critical, and I thank you all very much.
Thank you, Steve. Can you, I didn't see that in the letter that you sent in, the information about the 29th summit.
So it's the 28th and the 29th of April. As I understand the plan being put together, the 28th is really focused, especially on inviting people that have vulnerabilities, that have experienced homelessness or houselessness, however you term it, for the people with the needs to speak about what their needs are and what the steps are. It will also invite public comment, but I believe.
May I speak to the
Steve,
chair's question?
we're losing your audio, Steve.
Is that better?
That's better.
I'll just let you see my fishing beard here. The second day, the 29th, is where the service providers will get together, and I believe there'll be some prep work, but this is to lay out how to best move the money from the state into the city of Lawrence. And Andy Brown was one of you on this board, the AHAB board, as a member one time. He would very much like to see Lawrence capitalize, and the key is preparation. To get this money, they need to spend the money, and we just need a really good plan of how to best spend that money so that we'll get that 29th summit is the opportunity to put this together and get to the state. So when the millions come in, we know, well, I should say you service providers have a plan. That's really what it is in the city and the state and the county for how we're going to put this to best use so they can spend it for best use. Does that make sense?
Steve, thank you. That does make sense. Can you submit in writing with the dates and information about the summit to the AHAB as a public comment so that we can get that information back out to the people on the board?
Yeah, we'll send that to Diane. Should I send that to Diane?
That's what I'm asking. That's what I'd like to see. So
To you in writing, but we fully encourage you in your work. This is the golden goose, I guess, of opportunity.
Well, I think if some of our board members can interact with that summit, you know, at different points or whatever, then we can bring that back to this board. So we just need the information on how to get there and when. And... Okay, thank you, Steve.
Excellent. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, Jeff Crick, Planning and Development Services. I believe I have a follow-up to provide some additional information on that item for the board for you here.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, Mr. Chair, there was a Friday meeting and a Saturday meeting, and so we didn't have a opportunity to provide you with an official letter, but you should be getting that from Andy Brown and from Justice Matters. And again, my understanding is that goes to Diane Stoddard. Yeah,
Correct.
okay, perfect. So we will get you, and apologies for not having that submitted prior.
Just wanted to make sure we got the information so people can go if they wanted to, you know, if we can make it. Okay, do I have any other public comment? Jeff, I see none. We are going to.
Monte, could I just ask a question?
Yes, sure.
Edith Guthrie, member at large. I think this is wonderful, and I'm really excited that there's going to be this opportunity to attend. I just want to be clear, these dollars that are coming, we won't have any access to these dollars. Is that possible? Am I right? These are for services, not money that we as affordable housing will have the authority to use for projects. We're not service providers. Is that accurate? Is that an accurate interpretation?
Edith, this is Monte, Soukup chair. I don't know that. If there's somebody else that can jump in on that, that'd be great.
This is Dani Walters. I can maybe speak a tiny bit to that. There's still a pretty unclear picture as far as some of the funding that's coming down from this. For instance, you all are in charge of looking at the home funding. Well, we have been informed that we're getting a very large amount of home funding to address homelessness as well. So we don't know any of the specifics about that. I'm not sure how that's going to filter down through the city process, but I guess it's a stay tuned. I hate to say that, but as quick as the money was, talked about, it takes time to kind of backtrack and write all the guidelines and how they want it to be spent. So within the next couple of months, we'll probably get some information on that home funding, just kind of like what we'll be able to do with it. So other than that, like, I think there's some information on some of the funding, but there's also not information on some of it. So
That's helpful. I just want to say, because we've struggled about our role as service providers or not. I just want to kind of lock that in our heads.
I agree, Edith Monte, Soukup. I agree. We have struggled with that. And to the extent that those funds maybe would come through a process that would come to this board, anything we can learn would be good. And I, maybe selfishly, I'm hoping that, some of the services find other funding sources, because we've been encouraging that, and that we can really, dedicate our funds on bricks and mortar and affordable units. But, so I think whatever we can learn, obviously, is good. So Thomas, I saw you had your hand up to maybe make a comment.
Yeah, and I'm going to show my ignorance here, but I just need a little clarification. And this is just, I perhaps should have done a little background work on this. I've heard two terms used here. Dani used the word homelessness. Both Steve as well as Sarah first referred to homelessness, but then made a correction to houselessness. Could I get a differentiation? Could somebody define those for me, please? Steve, you had specifically first said homelessness and then corrected yourself. Can you tell me why that correction was made?
Well, it's a matter of perspective, and everyone has different ones. I mean, I love Dana's comment that describing people experiencing homelessness is important, because a home describes more than a building, right? It's your home. So there's that sensitivity. I try to say experiencing homelessness, because if you say someone's homeless, to me, that has a derogatory connotation many times that casts them as that. I don't like how that sounds or how that feels coming out my mouth or other people's at times. Houseless takes that out, and it's a description that is more current, that I hear more people that are woke to that saying houseless. So they're, because you could have a home by the river, you have a home wherever you live. So it I think in some realms it's a matter of taste, but that's my understanding. Experiencing homelessness to me is a respectful way to define somebody who needs a place to be safe, and houselessness is another way to do that. When we say someone is homeless, it sounds a bit castigation, I guess, is the way I would term it. That's my understanding.
Okay,
Actually, my hand written about the money, though, about Edith's question, from talking with Andy, and I wasn't at the meeting Friday, but the discussion went, and Dani would know much more than I ever would, because she's the brains in the outfit, but this money, there's millions of dollars available to Lawrence, as I understand, not just to the state, but like funneling this kind of amounts to our housing charge will go through the city, through the county, through the services, through the plan that we come up with cohesively. So I may be wrong about that, but in listening to Andy about the plan for this and how the money runs from KDADS, the message I got that was cool and clear is they have a lot of money and they want to look good spending it well. And he's encouraging Lawrence to do so. So I think it invites the city and the county and AHAB to be part of this discussion. Thank you.
Monte, Soukup Chair, thank you. I am, in order to keep us moving, one last call for public comment. Shannon, Oury.
Am I unmuted? I think so. So the other thing is that we have been given notice that there are going to be some vouchers that will come directly to the housing authority, depending on the methodology they decide to award those, which HUD is not aware of yet on how they're going to do that, but specifically targeted for as Steve says, those experiencing homelessness. And one of the things that I would really like to have at this meeting is those of us who work in the area know that it's just not a voucher's not enough. It's going to take more to support these households and these individuals. And so I'd really like to make sure that's on the agenda about, I will try to get as many vouchers as I possibly can, but I will need help from the rest of the community on how to support these individuals.
Thank you, Shannon. That's certainly appreciated perspective, and easy to take a victory lap when we get the vouchers, but there's, like I said, there's a lot more to that than that for successful housing. So, okay, one last call for public comment, and we're going to move on with the agenda. Okay, approve the minutes of March 8th. I would open the floor for a motion if somebody
Mr. Chairman, this is Ron Gacious, Chamber Representative on AHAB, and I move adoption. Adoption of the minutes of March 8th, 2021.
Okay.
Thomas Howe, Lawrence Board of Realtors representative. I would second that motion.
Okay, we have a motion and a second on the floor. Is there any discussion of the minutes? Seeing none, I will call the roll and we'll take a vote. Okay, I'm going to read these. I'm going to read the roll in the same order every time that I read, so you can be prepared to jump right on there. Okay, Edith Guthey.
Yes.
Shannon Oury.
Yes.
Rebecca Buford.
Yes.
Sarah Waters.
Yes.
Erica Zimmerman.
Yes.
Dana Ortiz.
Yes.
Ron Gacious.
Yes.
Thomas Howe.
Yes.
Paul Newsome.
Yes.
Monte Soukup. Yes. Motion passes 10-0. Okay, we are on to the next agenda item, which is the joint session with the Planning Commission. Jeff or Diane, I'm going to look to you, but first I think we ought to have the people from the Planning Commission introduce themselves. They've all been on here, they're watching, and we haven't given them a chance to even introduce themselves, so we could do that. And then I think you guys have a little bit of introduction to start the discussion.
Certainly. Jeff Crick, Planning and Development Services Director. To kind of expedite.
I've got a list of the planning commissioners who are on the call today, so I'll just kind of lead off by going through, and they can provide some introductory remarks, and then staff would just be happy to kind of tie back to our original discussion all the way back in March of 19 that we had the first time through. So planning commissioners, bear with me. I believe Chair Carter is available.
Hi there, David Carter, current chair of the Planning Commission. I've been on the Planning Commission since 2018. I'm a geographer by profession, but with a background in an academic background in planning. And I'm a native resident of Lawrence, and very happy to be here with you.
Vice Chair
Claire.
Luke Sinclair, yeah, I'm vice chair of the Planning Commission. I've been on the commission, I think, since 2017 or 18.
When David mentioned the year, I started to sweat because I can't remember exactly the year. In any case, I'm in my second term, and I'm excited about interacting with you all today. As Jeff said, it's sort of carrying on from our meeting a couple of years ago.
Commissioner Ashworth.
Hello, this is Sharon Ashworth, Planning Commissioner. I believe I've been on the Planning Commission since 2000. I work for Douglas County Extension, manage the Master Gardener Program, and I'm happy to be here. I wasn't at the first meeting, so I'm very anxious to learn today, so thank you.
Commissioner Carpenter.
Jim, you're on mute.
Jim Carpenter, started on the Planning Commission January 2015. I'm in my second term. Was appointed to fill an unfinished term, so I get to go for another 2 years. Past chair and been involved in a lot of things around the community for years. I'm a city appointee, and I'll just point out Chair Carter and Commissioner Ashworth are also city appointees. Vice Chair Sinclair is a county appointee. So we're a mix of 5 county appointees and 5 city appointees that are on the Planning Commission.
Commissioner Shanklin.
Hi, I'm Greg Shanklin, Planning Commissioner. I'm a county appointee to the Planning Commission. I'm now in my 7th month. I'm a licensed architect in New York, a member of the Kansas Bar. I have academic training in planning and urban economics. And I have lived in New York for the 35 years previous to 2017, moving to Lawrence then. And I have tons of experience in the production of housing around the world and would love to discuss that with anyone. Thanks.
Commissioner Willey.
Hi, I'm Karen Willey, Planning Commissioner for about 5 years, I guess. Really interested in housing issues, affordable housing issues, and I feel like I'm in the trenches in a few aspects of volunteer things that I work on about housing. And I'm really curious to hear how the discussion goes and what AHAB feels that we can partner with and help forward things with the Planning Commission. So let's get into it.
Jeff Crick, Planning and Development Services Director. Commissioner Willey set me up perfectly to kind of continue this on. I promise that wasn't scripted by any means there, but as part of your agenda this morning, we put on a couple of items that were related mainly to AHAB's, the housing toolkit, the annual report.
The market analysis to kind of share with the Planning Commission. We also included Plan 2040 Chapter 4, which is the Lawrence Neighborhoods and Housing Chapter, which is where the Planning Commission really puts a lot of work and effort into over the last few months to go through those details. So, and we mentioned earlier, the first meeting between the two boards, as many of you may remember, was actually in the Riverfront Conference Room at about 7:30 in the morning back in 2019. So we're a little bit later in the day right now. But we really wanted to kind of have this just as an opportunity to allow the two boards to talk and discuss on parts that they saw as overlapping and discussion points that they wanted to continue on about ways that Affordable Housing Advisory Board can, guide the work of the Planning Commission and the work that the Planning Commission do to help kind of guide the work of the Advisory Board and keep those channels open. And of course, for the benefit of the Affordable Housing Advisory Board, in instances like this with the Planning Commissioner, Vice Chair Sinclair sits as the operator of the board for us. So with that, turn it over to Monte and Vice Chair Sinclair to kind of kickstart that discussion as they would see fit.
All right, thank you, Jeff. I think there's, I guess I'll just say that, we appreciate, the work that you guys have done on, the ADU, considering the ADU stuff and the smaller lots and all of that, and just creating the density, because I think one of the challenges that I see that we face, at least, especially in new construction, is the fact that, we're creating these large lot suburbs or larger lot suburbs. And as we continue to do that, we're never going to create affordable housing. And we need to give the developers some tools to, one, allow them to build at a higher density and create affordable housing. But also we need to probably, I don't know if encourage is the right word, but somehow we need to get them to the point where they're building the kind of housing stock that our community also needs. I'm not saying we don't need those larger houses and stuff for those that can afford them, but we also need to be creating affordable stock, and that may mean smaller lots and smaller houses. And I'm not sure how we encourage that, because that's probably not how they make their best returns, right? But somehow that we need, if we're going to encourage that, I think our two groups somehow, and probably others, need to come up with ways that can make that more profitable. Maybe that's the one thing we need to do, because they're going to be profit driven. And like it or not, as much as I love the Plan 2040, that, you know, the community benefit certainly has created a stir in the development community, as I'm sure you're aware, more than aware. And there's concern about that because there's some lack of definition. Nobody really quite knows what that means yet. So I would love to see our groups steer that community benefit in the direction of some kind of affordable housing creation of some kind. I'm not sure that, this is my personal opinion, I'm not sure that Lawrence needs too many more parks. I'm not sure we can take care of too many more parks and those kind of things. So the benefit, if it could be affordable housing, certainly would truly be a benefit. So I guess I'm going to start off with those comments. David, do you have anything you'd like to add to that, or have other things we should be talking about?
No, I think that's fantastic. I'm going to defer to our vice chair, who is our representative at this particular representative leader at this particular meeting. But I appreciate your comments. I think the issue of the community benefit is bound to be one that we will have an animated discussion over this. So, Vice Chair Sinclair, would you like to pick up?
Sure, Luke Sinclair, Vice Chair of the Planning Commission. And Mr. Chair, I think your comments were good. I think my reaction to that, and I don't speak for the Planning Commission at all, so I'd invite them to speak up if they want, but I think all of us are, I get the sense that all of us are dedicated to affordable housing and making sure, I guess, being involved in a way that will make that possible. In my experience, I feel like we, though, as a planning commission, in some ways, are sort of hamstrung in a way, because we almost are reactive to what, we get something presented, it comes to us, and it's something we review and consider, and we look to Plan 2040 for the goals that are set forth in there, and whether or not the proposal or the application that's in front of us satisfies those. And so I guess outside of the our concrete decisions on an application, for instance, maybe a development application that talks about a community benefit, I get the feel sometimes that all we can really do is talk at our commissions and express our thoughts on issues, instead of actually doing some of the dirty work that it seems like AHAB gets to do, and pushing ideas and policies and things of that nature. So I like having this discussion because it feels like we can be maybe a little more proactive and engaged in thinking about these things, instead of just reacting when we have an application come in front of us at one of our public hearings.
Thank you, Luke. That's good. I can certainly appreciate that, your group isn't the group that's going to push this agenda necessarily. Karen, do you have a comment?
Karen Willey, Planning Commissioner. I think the way that our two commissions can work together is exactly that. Give us stuff to talk about. Bring us items, bring us text amendments that you want us to talk about, because that's what gives us the public forum to move that forward. I've been kind of surprised how silent you've been ever since we had the two houses on one lot. And I'm like, all right, we blew the doors off of how many square, what kind of size lot it takes to have a duplex, right? Even though that wasn't a duplex discussion. Bring us that. We don't have good, if we have something that you've initiated, it puts a lot of weight behind it to say, we don't need 15,000 square feet to have a duplex. We already said we only need 7. Push us on that. To any corner lot, you could ask us to say, consider a text amendment to say, any corner lot can be a duplex by right in any, within whatever that zoning designation is. We're here. We are available for your use. Bring us good ideas and let us hash them out.
Thank you, Karen. That's good. I'm not sure I'm an expert on what the next thing we need is, but certainly within our group, we have people that do enough with development work that we can probably come up with ideas for what we want. I wonder, I guess, Shannon, your comment?
So I have two questions, and one is sort of a what are the limits of what we can ask for kind of question. So let's say we sent you a request that if let Habitat or Tenants to Homeowners is building infill lots, and there are sidewalks and trees on the street, on the lots across the street. Can we bring to you a request to say, can they build these without putting in a sidewalk on both sides of the street? And can they have some sort of variance on how many trees they have to do and sort of those types of things? Is that something that you can do? And so that's my first question, is sort of what are the limits of what you guys that we can send specific requests? And the second one is, have you had one of these public benefit questions? Have you had to apply that yet? And what happened in that scenario?
Jeff Crick, Planning and Development Services Director. I think I will try to answer on behalf of the commission a little bit there, and Vice Chair Sinclair.
Jump in on me if I step astray on those. To your second question about the public benefit, one has not been brought forward to date, so we don't have any guidance on that one. For question number one related to trees and sidewalks, there are some levels to which the Planning Commission works in a ministerial function where if you meet the requirements, they do pass through and it has to go on its way. They do have the ability to hear variances under the subdivision regulations, which is where street trees and sidewalks do lie. So they have some ability to hear that. But in this capacity, it would be in them as the approving body as the variance option, not necessarily as the platting option. So subdivision regulations are a little bit of an animal unto itself when you talk about it, because it's not quite a zoning code. It's more about land division. So there's a different element that they have to enter into to allow items to go through. And Vice Chair Sinclair or any other members of the Planning Commission, please feel free to correct me if I've gone astray there. So.
I don't think I have any way of correcting you on that, Jeff. Thanks, Sinclair, Vice Chair.
But Chair, I have a follow-up question, I guess, to that. Is it possible, what I'm trying to do, I mean, thinking about the developer, because really they're our partner in this. We're not going to get this done by, us doing it. So we need to create an environment that's favorable for developers to develop the kind of housing stock we need. So, is it possible to, create some kind of text amendment that says, if your development or these three lots fall within the parameters of affordable, that there are, exceptions to, I don't know what they would be, the number of street trees, the width of sidewalk, whatever it would be, just to help, help push that along and make that kind of development a little more interesting to a developer. Because I think without making it profitable for them, they're never going to build. I mean, they're building for profit. That's just the nature of the beast, right? Whether that's good or bad. But so I think we need to think about things, and I'm not sure what all the things are. Maybe you guys have suggestions for things that we could consider looking at. That you tell us what they are, we'll look at them and bring them back to you to, see if we can implement them. And maybe that's partly staff too that could help with that. Yeah, Sharon?
Planning Commissioner Sharon Ashworth. I guess I would turn that back and ask if maybe there's bigger fish to fry street trees and sidewalks. I was pretty excited, you know, the two houses on the lot, and certainly the RS3 zoning I thought was very promising. That I'd like to see more of those options. For sidewalks and street trees, we have to think of balance of the other goals of Plan 2040. I mean, we want this to be a walkable city and a safe travel city. We want kids to be able to walk on the sidewalks, family to be able to walk on the sidewalks, safe routes to schools. So there are other considerations for sidewalks, and I'd hate to add to our gap problem in the sidewalks with that. So I'm not very excited about that, and it seems to be pretty small potatoes when it comes to affordable housing. There's got to be bigger fish to fry there.
Yeah, Gregory.
Hi, Greg Shanklin, Planning Commissioner. You know, I read the BBC report, and this is in response to Board Member Soukup's question of a minute ago. The BBC report is very good about expressing need, and it does a reasonably good analysis of the conditions at, you know, the time in 2018. But what it doesn't do much on is how we go about putting units on the ground from a supply side perspective. And one of the questions that I would ask for Jeff Crick is, has there been an inventory done of the developable capacity of the city of Lawrence to produce housing? And what would happen if we tweak that in various ways by changing the zoning ordinance to increase density? And a follow-up question on that, and this relates back to the mayor's letter, is there appears to be some reluctance to test the boundaries of inclusionary zoning based on the recent legislation that appears to prohibit it, yet at the same time provides for inclusionary housing if coupled with incentives. And there's also whether or not Lawrence has considered testing that against the home rule. And so I'm just wondering, you know, inclusionary housing seems to be an ideal solution for my perspective. I've worked in a lot of cities that have inclusionary housing, and it's a good way of providing additional affordable units. And so it's a shame that we can't do it. So I'd like to direct all that to Jeff Crick, if I may.
Jeff Crick, Planning and Development Services Director. Commissioner Shanklin, be happy to answer those. And please, I think I got both questions, so if I don't
answer one of them, please stop me and make me go back and get them. Part of what the department does for Planning and Development Services is we actually do two different reports. We do a residential lot inventory every year that looks at the amount of lots that are in this market and goes through, you know, are they developable, are they missing infrastructure, and give you kind of a rough hewn year count of what would be potentially available on the market. And so we do that every year. One other report we're getting ready to kind of start putting back on the schedule again is the multi-dwelling lot inventory report, which looks at where that first one I mentioned looks solely at detached dwelling and single-family zoning districts. This one looks at multifamily zoning and lot capacity and items on that side. I don't have the numbers just off the top of my head, but I think for the last residential lot inventory, it was somewhere between, I want to say 4 to 5 years, and I don't think that number's right as I start saying it out loud. I think it might be a little lower than that. For the last multi-dwelling lot inventory, we had about 21 years of latent capacity in the market for RM multifamily zoning in the city. Part of both of those reports go into the calculation that we use to develop the growth tiers for Plan 2040. So they were both factored in as part of the development factors of what was available on the market coming online. So they directly feed into that kind of tiering system that you see in Plan 2040 to understand what is available, kind of just as a exercise of potentially available on the lots and potentially available in the multifamily. And as planning commissioners know, and I'm sure AHAB also knows this very well too, is with multifamily zoning is while you may have the capacity to go up to 32 units per acre, most developers actually don't go up to the maximum cap. They usually work some level below of it because of you can run into easements or other things in there. So instead of you go, the way the brackets work is there's a 24 cap and a 32 cap, but you need to go to 30, so you up zone to 32 because you need to come back down. So there's a lot of different calculations that go into that as we get to it. And I believe, Commissioner Shanklin, your first question was about the supply side, is that correct? Or I think I've lost track of that one.
Yes, well, the supply side generally, and that goes to both development capacity, but also the skill set from the local construction industry. And can you, if you were to try to encourage higher density
in the city center, would people be able to build those units? It seems that we've made development pretty easy at the urban fringe. All we have to do is extend services, and I'm not even sure whether Lawrence
has an impact fee, which is another tool that ought to be considered if it isn't being used.
But we make it easy to build at the fringe, and it's hard to build in the center. And so you ask the question: can people do it? Is the technology available? Is the skill set there? So,
Jeff Crick, Planning and Development Services Director. I think that was a discussion point. I know we've had a planning commission. I think AHAB's also had it in many different ways over the years here. Infill development can be a bit tricky because there's a lot of different pressures that you tend to have in the middle that you don't typically have on sometimes the edges where you have those neighborhoods. And it can be neighborhood opposition. It could be infrastructure changes that have to occur, upsizing of lines. And there's a lot of different factors to it. By no means am I an expert on construction capabilities. I believe that we do have some people on AHAB who are much more versed and able to answer that than I would even be able to pretend to. So I would defer to them on that aspect.
Yeah, go ahead, Karen.
So, Commissioner Shanklin here. May I just follow on with the inclusionary zoning and impact fee questions? If you could just clarify that for me, I'd really appreciate it.
Certainly, Jeff Crick, Planning and Development Services. We don't necessarily have an impact fee. There are system development charges.
Required as you connect to the water and the wastewater system, so those who come online for those. And as far as I'm aware, inclusionary zoning, we've basically had that removed from our toolkit, which I think the Affordable Housing Advisory Board's toolkit identifies that as a item that's not available to us under Kansas law. Now, I can't speak to the aspect of home rule that you mentioned. That is well outside of my wheelhouse, but I do know that is a bit of a legal position that I'm not well enough to be able to answer on.
Commissioner Shanklin again. I think we should look at that inclusionary zoning, because unless the other lawyers on
the commission or the board could speak to that, it appears to me in Clause C that there's an express permission to have inclusionary zoning if you couple it with incentives. And so if you permit additional units to be built on a lot, for example, as an incentive, so long as they are affordable, you can start to work to solve that problem.
Go ahead, Karen.
Karen Willey, Planning Commissioner. I was kind of tacking on a little bit of what Commissioner Shanklin was talking about, not so much with the inclusionary zoning, but with just having the capacity to build when we are able to build. So of course, there's two aspects to the cost of building. One is the materials and the other is the labor. Cost of materials are through the roof right now, but labor here is especially also, and I think we can maybe chip away at that a little bit. We have Peasley Tech that is training and turning out people in trades, but we have barriers with our licensing program, our general contractor licensing program in the city of Lawrence that are barriers to entry for people who are new or getting established, which also hurts people of color who are trying to, step into a field where they are underrepresented. I think that we can be more proactive with how we look at that. The licensing program came in and really, if you're full-time, it's not a big barrier in terms of the continuing education and then this fee and that fee that the city of Lawrence requires, but it really squeezed out all of the part-time, do-it-yourself, mom and pop kind of contractors that were doing, making things accessible, doing remodels, all these things. The price in Lawrence for labor for these things is incredibly high. And it's because we have so few people doing the work. And we used to have more of those people than we have now. So I think that's not maybe something that's fun to talk about in terms of housing, but I think it's a big impact in terms of keeping people in their homes as they age, making them accessible, because we don't have the handy people to do the work. And we could do more with that, and we could partner more with Peaslee and making sure that the people that they're training have a way to also fulfill that need for our community.
Thank you, Karen. It's Monte, Soukup Chair. That's interesting. I think that you bring that up because we, in the last several rounds of funding, we have funded projects to keep people in their homes, to make accessible, there has been a significant amount of funding, and actually there's been more requests for funding than we've been able to fund. And, Tenants to Homeowners, I think, actually started a new program this year called ARM that essentially does that as well. So that's certainly a need, and, but we can, of course, with the funding, we can always use more of that. But that is an issue that we have struggled with. There's never enough funding, and we have to make these selections, and we're trying to balance, whether that's new units, keeping people in existing homes so they don't lose their house, or keeping them so they can stay, longer. So that's a good point. Yeah, Ron.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to comment on Commissioner Ron Gacious, Chamber Representative, AHAB Board. I'd like to comment on Commissioner Shanklin's comments and say that I'm encouraged by them. That he was really asking a question, but I'm encouraged by the question. And the question was, why don't we take advantage of what appears to be an express authorization in the statutory language to use an inclusionary zoning device with incentives? And, that's exactly the discussion we've needed to have ever since the community benefit requirement in Plan 2040 started to emerge, is what do those negotiations look like? I'm not surprised at all to hear that there hasn't been a single analysis of a community benefit requirement in Plan 2040. The developers are all sitting back very intentionally and just watching this play out. And we don't have any metrics in our community to measure whether Plan 2040 is successful, not that I've been able to find. So, if nobody tests the requirements of the community benefit, and we just sit here without any additional development on the perimeter, no one can point a finger and say, well, that's a success or that's a failure, because we don't have a metric that's driven by housing numbers by which we evaluate Plan 2040. I guess Plan 2040 would be a failure if we built something that started falling apart right away, or was so obviously in the wrong place that it never should have been built at all. But beyond that, we don't really have any standards to evaluate whether this new set of requirements is successful or not. So to hear that someone on the Planning Commission might actually be favorable to providing incentives to a developer to do something. And I don't mean that in an ironic way. I mean that very seriously. Ultimately, any incentive would have to be approved by our city commission. And you don't get elected to our city commission by promising to give residential developers incentives. You get defeated at the polls. So I think that what's missing is the very same thing that Monte said he'd like to see. We don't have these discussions with enough private sector people. We've got, I'm looking at my screen, you know, there's 3 of us, Paul, Tom, and me. And I know nothing about the development industry, only what I've been reading since I've been an AHAB member. I'm not really a representative of that industry. I'm just the chambers guy who happened to have an interest in housing issues. And, you know, everybody else wandered off to other things. And I was still standing looking at the AHAB assignment and thinking, well, this will be interesting. And gosh, it has been. So to hear that someone publicly suggest that we incentivize private sector developers to build what all of our surveys tell us is desperately needed in the community is, to me, I think, something of a very important first step. And I want to do everything I can to encourage it. You know, we've got a lot of smart people on this Zoom call. We're not going to solve this problem. The people in this room, this Zoom room, can only work on the policy side. There are only a few not-for-profits that are building any new units or putting people in rentals on the call. The rest of us are just, you know, here for the policy work, I guess. And we've got to get the builders and the labor sources and everything lined up if we're going to move the needles on all of the on all of the metrics that I think are important, which are how many people are we putting into homes, into houses.
Thank you, Ron. I think I got Luke and Jim both maybe indicated they wanted to talk, but Luke, go ahead.
Sure. Luke Sinclair, Vice Chair, Planning Commission. I'll be short because Jim will probably, I know he's more articulate on some of these issues and may be thinking the same things. But the one thing I wanted to mention is, I don't know if I'm confused by the discussion a little bit, but as I understand it, the community benefit requirement is only applicable when we get into discussions of annexations.
Mm-hmm.
And so if people are, if they're a developer, I think development in the city needs to be thought of separately from the community benefit provision of Plan 2040, because that's really, that's applicable on the fringes. And so then I guess if we can split that up, then we can talk more about, you know, what can be done to incentivize infill development, more density, versus that on the fringes. Because I think Plan 2040 is pretty clear and actually specifically says that, you know, you can talk, or I guess the city staff can discuss with a developer that wants to annex offsetting incentives, and that was basically a sort of giveaway to builders and developers in the process of putting the plan together, because that wasn't in there to begin with. That was just something that was raised as a concern. So I would just point that out, I guess, as we sort of talk about these sorts of things.
It's Monte, Soukup here. Luke, I think you're exactly right. There's 2 things going on there, and really, I agree. We need to figure out how to make these infill projects work for developers. You know, they want to go out and build, you know, 20 houses in a row because there's efficiency in doing that and whatnot. For them to come in and do a onesie twosie somewhere just becomes a lot more difficult, and that there isn't an incentive there to do that of some kind. Whether that's, you know, what that incentive looked like, I don't know. I'm not smart enough to figure that out, but we need to create that atmosphere that gives them the opportunity to still be profitable and get these, you know, houses we want. And maybe, you know, that's a incentive that's tied to affordability, obviously, in my view. So.
Mr. Chair, Jeff Crick, Planning and Development Services. I believe Shannon, Oury, Paul Newsom, and
Carpenter have their digital hands raised.
Okay, great. Paul, go ahead.
Well, the license barriers, the sidewalks, the street trees, I think those are all great things to discuss, talk about starting points, etc. I just think it's worth noting that currently, and it's not groundbreaking news, but currently we are being far outpaced with lumber prices, material prices. I don't want to call them bidding wars on existing homes, but our Thomas can speak to this better, but our housing stock is so low that we're often seeing prices driven up just on offers for homes for sale. So it's just worth noting and keeping at the forefront of this discussion that right now we're up against some big factors that are really driving up costs very significantly.
Thank you, Paul. That's very true. Erica, did you have your hand up? Is that what? No, Shannon?
I think it was up from before, so I'm not sure who takes it down, but.
All right.
Mr. Chair,
Yeah.
Jeff Crick, Planning and Development Services. Commissioner Carpenter has his digital
Yeah,
hand up.
I see. Jim?
Jim Carpenter, Planning Commissioner. I just want to build on several things that have been said. First, Vice Chair Sinclair did come in with several of the things I had my hand up about. We went through Plan 2040, line by line, word by word for months. And when it went to the city committee, and this is after 5.5 years with the steering committee. So when it did go to the city commission, there are only 2 paragraphs that were discussed. One was the community benefit and the other was changing may back to a shall, because we had changed it to shall to may and they wanted it back. And that was it, because the rest of it, but so this just kind of leads into the role of the planning commission here. We're just an advisory board, except for a very small number of things, granting variances, which we've had sidewalks come up. We've had street trees. There was a text amendment to have those, the timing of when sidewalks and street trees went in. We gave our advice on that. That went to the city commission. But, we've got Plan 2040 sitting out there, but it's not been implemented yet. So we can't really say it's been tested or not tested, because we have area plans that surround the city. They've not been updated to reflect Plan 2040 yet. We have a building and development code from 2006, which the only updates to that so far are to change references from Horizon 2020 to Plan 2040. We haven't gone through and really looked at the development code or zoning categories or anything else to see how or if they should be modified to bring us more into compliance with Plan 2040, and specifically with affordable housing. Early, we heard about lot sizes. There is a discussion about lot sizes.
Yeah.
And I don't know how many, I'm sure all of you watch every one of our meetings, but we've had quite a few meetings where lot sizes have come up, and it's in lands in growth tier 2 surrounding the city, and even in 3, because if the city's going to expand, it's a lot harder to expand to areas with 5-acre lots than it is to city lot sizes. It's the infrastructure costs are outlandish. We're also at a point the city's got to figure out if we go northwest, which is where it seems to be the push, and to the west, that we're at that stage of needing another fire station. Where's that going to come from? So there's so many competing issues going on at one time here. And as was pointed out, this community benefit is only for newly annexed land, but we're kind of stuck on newly annexed land until we get area plans upgraded, because we're having majority votes that turn down large lots in those areas or something that goes against Plan 2040, throwing it to either the city or the county commission to make a decision. You also have to consider, the city commission's only up to the city limits, and a little bit about what we'd like to see in growth tier 2 outside the city limits. And then we got to bring in the county. Now we've got Eudora that's put a ban on any new residential in growth tier 3 around their city. So there's a lot of moving parts, and our role, we really, like I said, is advisory unless it comes to amending the comp plan. And then we have to agree to that, just like the city and county commissions have to. So that's kind of our biggest club right there. But as was said, anybody can bring up issues and bring them to us. Glad to have the discussions. We're still trying to figure out, we need plans updated, and that, the city's made efforts to bring on more staff to do that. So don't give up. But I can't let the community benefit thing pass either. With all due respect to Commissioner Shanklin, he's the only one out of the 10 that wasn't here for that discussion that went on for, I think, 3 meetings and then 1 contentious city commission meeting. And the idea, as Vice Chair Sinclair brought up, is that this inclusionary zoning, requesting affordable housing or certain housing types in newly annexed land could be considered a community benefit, which in turn would provide some incentives in some form, such as reduced fees or higher density or anything else that the city was able to negotiate. Community benefit wasn't meant to be a static issue. It was meant to be vibrant and take into consideration the needs of the community at the time that there was a request to bring in the land. So it hasn't been tested because we're kind of stuck without updating the plans to be able to annex. We haven't even updated the annexation rules in our land use development code to bring them in compliance with Plan 2040. So we have conflicting rules out there. So there's a lot of groundwork we have to get through first. So I don't know, it's daunting, but send us whatever, because then it puts more pressure on the city commission. And I wish there was a way we could send more from you to the county commission at the same time.
Thank you, Jim. I want to make one quick little comment, and then I see Paul's got his hand up. So, Monte, Soukup Chair, Ahab. I wonder if it would be helpful if we actually somehow tried to define at least one community benefit, so that when something came, if we said, okay, if you're going to build, you want to annex, 5 acres to build a subdivision or whatever that is, 20 acres, that we would say, if you put, 5% of that or whatever the number is into the affordable realm, that would be considered a community benefit. Because then that would maybe at least give the developers something that they know if they meet this criteria, that is likely to be approved as their community benefit. Because I think part of the concern in the development community, at least the people I've talked to, is like, we don't know what it means. We don't know if we, develop a plan and spend, several $1,000s developing a plan, and we go to get it, preliminary approval or whatever, and it gets canned, and then we're back at ground zero figuring out again what our next submittal is be. So if we could make some kind of, if our group could say, look, this is what we see as community benefit, and could push that out to your group, would that be helpful? So, and with that, I'm going to turn it over to Paul, I guess, unless somebody has a comment on that.
Jeff Crick, Planning and Development Services Director, if I may just kind of piggyback
on that one. On page 21 of Plan 2040, there's actually outlined community benefits may include but are not limited to, and it provides a list of items there. Item number 1 on the list is the creation of permanent affordable housing or the provision of land donation to the Housing Trust Fund. So there's already kind of a list of options that are out there in the open that are potentially available. It's got quite a wide range of them. Includes parks, public safety, educational facility, potential for lands, preservation of sensitive lands, creation of primary employment opportunities, and addressing the goals of the strategic plan. So there is a list out there, but item number 1 on that list is towards that affordable housing item. And if I could take a moment, honestly, kind of piggyback back towards Commissioner Carpenter's comment, I think the comment about, the land development code is a great one. That code was developed in 2006, and it was based on a 1998 comprehensive plan that we've just recently shelved. I think the moment is upon us to take a look at and say, this new code or whatever we want to do next, does it give us the community that we want? Is it giving us the things that we desire to see? And I think the role of Affordable Housing Advisory Board is just as magnified and powerful as Planning Commission in that, because that's going to be the document that guides the way that Lawrence and in some ways Douglas County will grow in the next 20 years. So I think, the board, the AHAB is going to have a very strong role in it. I think Planning Commission is going to have a very strong role in that by stature of what they do. But I think a rewrite in the code in that way would actually fall in a very good line for both entities to bring those together and meld them in a way that we start to see them kind of take heart in the community more than we do now.
Thank you, Jeff. And I was aware of the list and recognize it says affordable housing, but as a developer, does that mean one lot,
one house, or does that mean, half of my development has to be in order to get through the next line? I think some, at least for affordable housing, we could come up with something that says, if you're 5%, affordable in that new neighborhood, then that would fill the bill, right?
Yeah.
So I think we could maybe put some better definition possibly, and maybe that's a death trap. I don't know. Just trying to think of how to push forward and give them, the development community, some more certainty that they are, when they're investing money in trying to get something annexed or developed, that they have more certainty as they go in through the process. Just like they have the code to guide them on what their streets have to be and the sidewalk has to be and all that. They need probably a little more meat around that, is my gut feeling. Yeah. So I had to put off Paul for quite a while here. Paul, you had your hand? Okay, sorry.
Didn't mean to take the floor there.
No, you're good. Paul Newsom, Lawrence Home Builders Association. Yeah, I'm not quite sure how to say this precisely, but to the extent that both of our boards are advisory boards, or we advise and we don't have a lot of policy making muscle, on some level, I think it's important to also be aware of that role in making the decision makers aware of the sense of urgency that some of us are feeling, and concern about, specifically home builders and developers, in that some of the ambiguity that of the benefit, but also just kind of already feeling like we're behind the gun, where we're behind 5 years behind planning on where we're going to go next, or how we're going to jump the bypass, or which direction can the city grow, should the city grow. So just to the extent that we do advise, it's also important to advise of some of the urgency that's being felt out there.
Yeah, Ron.
Ron Gacious, Chamber Representative to the AHAB Board. A response to some of the comments I've heard from representatives of the Planning Commission, I had not heard anyone articulate the trailing work that needed to be done following adoption of Plan 2040. And it sounds as though that could stretch out over many meetings. And then I hear Paul's comment talking about the urgency from the perspective of developers and builders. And I feel, as an Affordable Housing Advisory Board member, a sense of urgency to have longer term plans for creating new affordable housing facilities, actual units. I'm wondering, to the leadership of the Planning Commission, does it make sense to try to accelerate some of that work by intentionally compressing it into a shorter period of time? And what kind of burdens would that put? And Jeff, this would be a quick question for you then also. What kind of burdens would that put on staff or planning commission if we tried to take what, and I don't know, maybe that trailing work would take 3 years or 2 years? Is there any way to get it compressed into 12 months so that the developers and builders can start to see with greater acuity what the requirements and standards and zoning requirements are going to provide and call for? Is that a bottleneck that's right in front of us and we're just now identifying it, or at least I'm being aware of it?
Jeff Crick, Planning and Development Services Director. Commissioner Gates, let me kind of give you an answer on that one. One item I think is we've had a little bit of a bottleneck with Plan 2040 because we were very focused on getting that figured out and the details sorted, because that's going to inform all of the next steps that come after that. Part of what the Planning Commission sees and does with the County Commission and the City Commission is there's a 3-year work plan that is developed that kind of outlines what's going to be happening to kind of carry out those implementation steps going forward. Planning Commission, I think, is aware of this, and I don't know if AHAB is, but there recently was additional staff members that were added to our planning division inside of Planning and Development Services that we're hoping will allow us, that will allow us to get out there and hopefully get ahead of a lot of those planning issues that we've seen before. So what we're working on right now is how to speed up those area, sector, and neighborhood plans to kind of get caught up with that work in there. Another item that we're actively looking at is actually the land development code, because a lot of that kind of the crux of the thing is the code itself is going to be it. And what we're working forward to right now is a recommendation for having somebody come on to do that kind of work to get that up to speed too. So it's, if you're correct in kind of seeing that it is a little bit of a bottleneck in some ways there, but we're trying to, we've got some added staff coming online to help us clear that out. We're going to find some ways to kind of make some of that work happen a lot quicker. You know, a comprehensive plan takes a bit of time to write, and we hopefully want to make that period of implementation as short as we can coming out of one of those. So that's something we're working on right now at them.
Shannon, go ahead.
So I just want to bring up the fact that the Home Builders Association has worked with us and come and appeared before us, and they had a whole list of things that they wanted to be considered to try to reduce the cost of development. And we did a whole review of that, and staff brought us a memo back. And that outcome was that kind of no single item would result in a significant amount of savings. And from a policy perspective, I just want to say, you know, really clearly that I love living in Lawrence, right? I love the way our city looks. I love our trees. I love that I rode my bike to work today, and that I did so safely. But at some point, our design, like some of these issues are going to bump up against each other. And we can't have all of the aesthetically pleasing things and all of those type of things and develop a significant amount of affordable housing. And, you know, I've been here 20 years now, and what I see a lot is sometimes nobody wants to make the really hard decisions about, you know what, we're not going to require this many trees, or we're not going to require sidewalks on both sides, or we're not going to require, you know, some other thing, because all of those things add up. And what we're going to try to do is figure out one way from point A to point B to reduce building a house by, you know, pick a percent, 10%, 15%, something. Because otherwise we're going to keep, we're going to continue to have this conversation. And I mean, I've been involved, I think, in AHAB since the very beginning, which was what, 16, 15, 16. We've had this conversation now for 6 years. And other than the double density or the density bonus, there hasn't been significant amount of progress on talking about what does it cost to build a house in the city of Lawrence.
Mr. Chair.
Yeah, go ahead, Thomas.
Thomas Howe, Lawrence Board of Realtors representative. And I apologize, anybody who was on our little meeting the other day. I'm going to go back on my high horse about this. A year ago, we had 400 houses to sell in the city of Lawrence. In February of this year, same 1 year later, we had 40 houses to sell. We are getting deeper and deeper into this hole. One of the issues that I continue to hear is that the minutia and the red tape that it takes to do development is holding us back. And I don't know how we address this. I'm very pleased that we are having a discussion today about how do we move forward. When I moved to Lawrence in 1978, we were extremely vital. There were people wanted to move to Lawrence. I think it was a town of about 60,000 at that point. We had good growth. We had good attractiveness. We had, it was a great community. It was not, there was growth and there was activity and there was liveliness. And I feel like we have lost that to some extent. We are going to get deeper and deeper into trouble if we do not make some substantial changes to how do we look at growth, how do we look at development. During that meeting, and I had left by this time, my understanding is that there was some feeling that this is a very self-centered position that both the Lawrence Home Builders and the Lawrence Realtors are taking. But the reality is that all of us are people. I moved to Lawrence because of a lot of reasons. And I do a lot of service. I serve in a number of capacities. I serve our community because I love this community and I want it to grow. I want it to thrive. And so this conversation is really, it's so important. And I'm really pleased to have Planning Commission here to be able to talk about, are there substantive changes that we can make? The fact that we're still working with a 2006 document, that to me, when I heard that, that is appalling. That says, what is it that's holding us back? So I apologize for my impassioned speech there, but I think that we need to make substantial, we need to put things in play, whether that comes out of this group, whether it comes out of a whole separate task force. I think that it is really important to the well-being of this community, that all of us, we would not be on this call if we did not believe that service to our community was important. And I look at this whole group of people and I say, the only reason you are here is because you are giving your time to make our community better. So let's do it. Let's figure out how to make our community better.
Monte,
Mr. Chair.
Chair, Karen, go ahead. I'm gonna have just a few more people make comments, and I think we need to kind of wrap this up. And I'm gonna try to maybe summarize that. But if you have a thought, let's get it out there. And so go ahead, Karen.
Karen Willey, Planning Commissioner. I think we could benefit from hearing from Rebecca Buford, if you're willing to talk about your experience building in Baldwin and why that might be different, and if there are any lessons for us. So I know you have some lots or are working on some lots nearby the housing not-for-profit that Commissioner Carpenter and I serve on. So if you have anything to add, that'd be great.
Thank you, Karen. Unfortunately, we're just in the beginning phases of that, so I don't know that I have lessons learned yet. I think it does, in my 20 years of developing affordable housing in Lawrence, and I'm the executive director of Tenants to Homeowners. I didn't introduce myself well. Well, first of all, I need to say inclusionary zoning, yes. However we want to do it with incentives. I mean, I think it gets at the issue we're all talking about is like there's value judgments and developers are often seen as, and I am a developer of affordable housing, but a developer nonetheless that has gotten very frustrated with different rules that make it very hard to afford and build what we're trying to do. But I think there's some need right now, and this discussion is a great example of that, and continuing with Plan 2040 and the new land development code. It sounds like there's going to be some great discussions here soon that these groups really talk about the reality of we may need to limit some of our values on sidewalks on both sides of the street and some of these things, and that other groups have to be willing to do higher density, inclusionary zoning, where some of your development, you're going to have to make partnership with someone who does affordable housing. And those discussions, I mean, I can't say enough about, I know the supply issue has come up over and over again on the community benefit, but to me, us giving incentives and saying, look, but for some incentives, here's some community benefits you have to provide, which is affordable housing, means I've heard from developers that do much bigger units, to Commissioner Shanklin's point, that have the capacity to do that. And now they're talking to me to say, hey, can you do 5 or 10 of those as affordable? So now we're not putting it all on developers. We're creating incentive packages and ideas that we can work cooperatively and bring, you know, the affordable housing nonprofits that are at this table who don't have capacity to build 500 units. We don't, but we need to increase the supply to that. So Monte's saying we need to get the for-profit developers involved. How do we create cooperative efforts on that development to increase supply and increase affordability within that supply? And to me, inclusionary zoning and incentive packages and demanding that we meet those efforts is, you know, part of what we need to come up with as part of new code, new rules. It sounds like it's amazing, this discussion. It sounds like we're all really on the same page. We just need some additional tools to push the needle that direction. And I do agree with Paul. Of course, as we start doing this right now, our costs are insane. So that's kind of a bottleneck in material costs that hopefully won't be forever, but it's hard to imagine they'll go down much. So we really have to also consider that in our values. And, you know, I love sidewalks as much as anyone else, but the density, the new development we're working on, which is a new cul-de-sac with those 3,000 square foot lots, right? So great job. We have 3,000 square foot lots. We're creating a little more density. But the idea that we need to put sidewalks on both sides of a half a block cul-de-sac that goes to a sidewalk that goes to the Burroughs Creek Trail is a ridiculous expense that is not needed on a cul-de-sac. And so that's a really good example of where my 7 houses, those small lots, I'm still at 50,000 a lot. You know, it's unaffordable to start with, but we've got we're building smaller houses. Now my material costs have gone up by 20,000 to 30,000 per house. We're going to have to get an additional huge subsidy. We've gotten 175,000 additionally from the Sunderland Foundation. That's not going to cover it. So the reality is we're going to have to make some decisions and make sure that those values are going to create more supply that includes affordable supply. Because I agree, I don't want us to have policies that just create supply for wealthy individuals. So, you know, there's a kind of carrots and stick approach that has to be taken. And those are my thoughts, but I will absolutely report back on if there is some differences with Baldwin and is there some lessons learned there. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Rebecca. Okay, I'm going to kind of try to wrap this up and maybe summarize a little bit, at least what I heard. And I think the big things that I took away from this is that the Planning Commission would love to have us look at changes or maybe text amendments, whatever that is, that would help incentivize, create affordable housing for you guys to consider, because our mission is affordable housing, period, right? And you guys are the enforcement of, review and enforcement of those kinds of codes and things. So, to the extent that you guys have ideas, we would love to receive those ideas for things that you think we might be able to have I know you aren't going to make a recommendation on them necessarily, but if you would send them to us and say, hey, you should look at this, because this might yield something, then we can do the work and make the recommendations that help on affordable. Okay, so I see, and I'm going to wrap that up, and if David has his hand up, I'm going to ask for him to speak, and then we'll be done.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to amend your comment or your observation, which came from, I think, Commissioner Carpenter, this idea that we'd love to see specific ideas coming from you, because I do want to speak to the issue of street trees and sidewalks, which came up several times. We did discuss that recently, and I want to contextualize that from the perspective of return on investment. Because any degradation of our expectations from an environmental safety or aesthetic perspective ought to come with a specific benefit so that we can measure what we're sacrificing versus what we're getting out of it. And the specific context of that discussion was not just that it's not going to have enough of a benefit, but that it came as part of an initiative to reduce the cost of housing construction by a specific percentage, and that these recommendations failed to meet that goal. So I think my observation during that meeting was we're all for looking for ways to reduce the cost of construction, but it ought to come as a package of recommendations that we can discuss, and not just a couple of things that might have some sort of impact, but still on their own whittle away at our expectations from a community standpoint. So I just want to amend what you said about specific recommendations, not just in terms of incentives, but in terms of overall policy recommendations that have the potential to materially affect the affordability of housing in Lawrence. Thanks.
Thank you, David. And I would just add to that, I guess, a little bit that, our goal would be, if we're going to make some impact, it would be for the sake of incentivizing affordable. So I'm not going to make a recommendation or I don't see us making a recommendation to street trees and for anything that's not in the affordable realm. It's not our job to look at that code and figure out what that is. That's not what we do, but only in the fact that it might incentivize or allow someone to build affordable housing. So we're going to limit our scope to what we might recommend to you guys, I think. So, okay. One last call if somebody has a last comment or anything, and then we're going to move on to the next agenda item. Okay, seeing none, I would sincerely like to thank the Planning Commission members that came today. It's been a great discussion. Love having that, and gives us some good things to chew on for a while. And hopefully we'll get something back to you guys to some creative ideas and things that will help incentivize affordable housing. So thank you.
Thank you.
Moving on to item 2, I guess, receive monthly financial report.
Good afternoon, Danielle, Bushcutter Budget and Strategic Initiatives Administrator. While everyone, all of our planning commissioners drop off the call, I will give a very brief update on our revenues and expenditures for 2021. I just wanted to highlight that we have now received our March sales tax figures, and we received in the Affordable Housing Sales Tax Fund about $79,000 in the month of March. Which is keeping us right on track with our kind of revenue estimates. So we've collected about 27% of sales tax revenue proceeds, about a quarter of the way through the year. So we are right on track with where we expect to be. Typically February is a little bit higher. So just wanted to kind of make that note for you all. On the expense side, we do not have any expenditures yet, even though you all have made recommendations to the commission. They've received those recommendations. We actually don't see that on the financial side until we actually get all of those agreements fully executed, fully signed. and into our system. So those will start to trickle in probably over the next few meetings, but just wanted to highlight and make note of that. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions any of you may have.
Ron, go ahead.
Yes, Ron Gacious, Chamber Representative, AHAB Board. Question for Danielle. Do we have any projects that have been funded in prior years that have stalled or not started for some reason? And I'm thinking specifically of the empty lot at where I thought 23 Tennessee was going.
Diane Stoddard, Assistant City Manager. I think that Dani Walters is on, and Dani perhaps she's been in contact recently with that particular project and may have an update for you to share. But we do monitor all the projects, and there's certain milestones that the projects have to meet in order to receive the funding. And of course, we are looking to them to provide reports for us to after the housing is done. This particular one, she would have some information here for you. Thank you.
Yes, this is Dani Walters. The 2310 Flats project has gone through a little bit of changes. And the pandemic hit, and all of a sudden, as we've documented on this call, price of materials has gone up. So they're in the process of taking a look at this, and if this project does change, they will be bringing it back to you for consideration. They have until, I believe it's sometime in October, to commence construction to be within the stipulations of the agreement. So more to come on that in a relatively short amount of time. So.
Thank you, Danielle. Any other questions on that, on the monthly financial report? Okay, thank you. We'll go to quick updates, which I think turn this over to Jeff, I think.
Actually, Jeff Crick, Planning Development Services. I'll actually turn it back to Dani.
She can introduce.
Okay, all right.
Yes. Dani Walters, Development Services. Yes, we are
Incredibly thrilled to introduce to you guys our new Affordable Housing Administrator. Leah Ruslin's on the phone. Some of you might recently know her with the United Way. She's the VP of Community Impact there. She has a great track record with strategic planning and grant system implementation and grants management, organizational leadership, a lot of really great board experience, community engagement experience, and then she also has a lot in the area of equity impact work. So we are thrilled that she's joining us, and think that she is going to be great with this group and great with this work. So Leah, I don't know if you have anything you want to add. She officially doesn't start until next week, but she was gracious enough to attend the meeting with us here today. So.
Okay, I'm not hearing anything from you.
I guess not, but yeah, so she'll be with us full-time starting next meeting. And you guys will hear from her before then too, just kind of as she introduces herself.
Great. Well, I know the whole committee is looking forward to having a dedicated staff person. Not that you guys have not done a great job, because you have, but having that dedicated person will be fabulous for us. So welcome aboard. I guess the last thing on the agenda is a letter. I don't know that we have to discuss that. I thought it looked really good, and glad that went out to the state to be submitted for that committee to work on. So I think that was a good statement. So thank you for staff for getting that all put together and gathering our thoughts, our discussion thoughts, and getting it formalized. So. Okay, short of that, is there any new business? Okay, I am not seeing any hands. I would like to circle back to that, to maybe adding to a future date, the tenant screening process. And obviously we need to still follow up on the income discrimination issue. I think, I don't know what that looks like, but maybe first a staff review of what Wyandotte, or not Wyandotte County, but what Kansas City, Missouri did. And if that is, you know, a workaround that is possible for our community, that we at least have confirmed or not confirmed that, to further that discussion. I'd like to add those things, kind of our hit list of future topics. And then I think the other thing that we need to add to our future topics are these discussions that we just talked about with the Planning Commission on what we need to have, maybe a brainstorming session or something, or maybe even invite some private developers into a work group or something to talk about what ideas they have, what fears they have, what things might work for them, because I think without talking to them, we may miss the mark by quite a ways. So I think those are the three future topic things I think we really need to move forward. So that second topic would include inclusionary zoning and housing and all those kind of things that we talked about with the commission. Other than that, I have no new business, but just want to put those on our future list. Anyone else? All right. The next item on the agenda is the calendar. So our next meeting is May 10th. We have scheduled June 14th and then July 12th. Jeff, is there anything we need to know about those? Nothing special about those?
Meetings coming up?
Jeff Crick, Planning Development Services Director. Nothing special that I'm aware of. They're just kind of standard meetings, and we'll look to kind of chart out future topics for those as they come up.
Great, great. I'll be back in touch with you and we can talk about when we might introduce these other items
and what we need to do to get prepared for that. So with that, is there any final comments? If not, we will adjourn. We don't need a vote to adjourn, do we? Or do we?
Jeff Crick, Planning Development Services. I don't believe so. I think we can just adjourn.
Okay. Excellent. Excellent. Then I'm giving you back 7 minutes, believe it or not. So, all right. Thank you, everyone. I appreciate all the input today. Great meeting. Really great meeting. So thanks.